Okay, so now that I've got the fuel fittings cleaned up, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start from the front of this machine and work backwards to replace everything. Mostly just because there's length of fuel tubing and everything else. I don't want to put the tank on quite yet, and so what I'm going to do is I'm starting on the front, work my way all the way to the back, replacing stuff as I go, because typically if you're going to run out of fuel line, you have more space to do it in the back of the machine than in the front of the machine. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and I'll tell you what, I liked these lights when I first got them. Now they're just absolutely awful. What are they? Grips? Yeah, grip. They were like 10 bucks. Of course, I suppose you get what you pay for. I'll have to get better lights. So what I'm going to do, we've got to get behind this fuel pump here, and we've got to get behind this access. We have to get access behind this panel right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect all the wires and everything, disconnect this harness. Actually, I don't think I need to disconnect that harness. But disconnect this so we can actually fold this panel out, this shield out. I'm also going to take the pry bar right here, and I'm going to pry this back like that so we can get to both of these screws. Now, one really common issue on these 318s is this firewall tends to break. Right? You can see where it's broken right in there. Pretty common problem. Actually, very common problem. I haven't seen too many 318s that have not had broken firewalls. Now, one thing that this tractor is missing is its firewall foam. I know everybody gets really excited about the firewall foam or whatever, says it makes the engine run cooler, yada yada yada. To be perfectly honest, I think it amounts to a whole hill of beans. I'm more concerned about, say, the rubber gasket that goes around the oil filter, things like that. Just not all that concerned with it. You can say what you want to about that. I'm just not a big. If the firewall foam is, if I have a chance to replace it, I'll replace it. If I don't have a chance to replace it, I'm not going to replace it. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pry bar, bend this out, loosen this up. I'm going to take these lines off, or replace these lines first. I'll also we've got to take this bolt right here, and remember the engine is all standard, so these are 3/8. That's a half. Yeah, it's 7/16. That's a ½ inch. Yeah, 7/16, ½ inch. Don't think you need to take this one off. I'm trying to remember some of these later engines about everything. I may have to take one off down in there, but I'll go ahead and get that done, and then we can fold that out. I think I got to take one apart down to the front here. Then we'll peel this down and we'll work on replacing all that. Alright, you're going to have to pardon the heater. Just got a little cold in here. And so anyway, what you're looking at right there in front of you is the line that runs from the fuel pump right here to the crankcase. So if you bend this down a little bit more, you can actually see where that line runs into the crankcase. Most likely, that line is original to the tractor. So what we're going to do is, I've already got this peeled back a little bit. You can see where I've bent it right there. Now, no big loss bending it. That gives us enough room to get in there and get both those screws. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and take the lines off right here. That way you can just pull it out. The next question becomes, do you want to replace the hose clamps with actual stainless hose clamps, or do you want to reuse what you got? Honestly, I think either one is perfectly fine. It's not a high pressure system, so I think in this case I'm just going to reuse the hose clamps that I have, and that'll be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and take the hose, all the fuel hose off from the carburetor to the fuel pump, and then take it off the fuel pump, and then we'll take the fuel pump off and replace this hose going back to the engine. So also pretty excited to the fact that the engine is not too dirty in there. Also no leak to speak of around the oil filter adapter. That's certainly something that has leaked in the past and whatnot, so certainly glad to see there. So I'll go from there, and when I come back, I'll have everything taken apart and we can start putting new hoses on. Alright, so working on getting everything taken apart. You can see the old parts down there. I actually keep those around until I cut the new hoses. That way I have something to judge for length. Right now, I am messing with the crankcase hose here. It does not want to come off. I actually ended up, depending on what year your 318 is, your coil may be mounted somewhere different or maybe a different shape. This is a newer style type coil, and so it actually protrudes, the bottom protrudes down and almost touches this line right here. So actually I ended up having to take that line out, or I take the coil out so I can get to the line. I've removed the hose clamp, and now it's just a matter of getting the actual hose out. It's very difficult to get something back in there. So I think what I'm going to do is actually get a long pair of wire cutters, go back in there, kind of just snip it off the side. You do want to be really careful if you're doing something like that, because if you're going in, you don't want to damage the ports like that right there, because if you damage it, then it won't seal, and if it doesn't seal, you're not going to get a good pulse, and you're not going to get good fuel flow. Same thing with these. You don't want to damage that, because if they're damaged, then obviously they won't work all that great and you'll leak fuel. So I'm going to get this line off, then we'll go ahead and cut some new lines. This line going through the air holder right here actually did really well. I'm kind of shocked. But what we're going to do is to feed the new line back through, we're actually going to put some WD-40 on the new line to get it back through. So with that being said, I'll get back to work and we can go from there. Alright, so here's the fuel pump all out. Now I just got to get it cleaned up. This is an original fuel pump. The new ones are actually a little bit more square. Now what happened is you can actually see that I ended up breaking the the hose. The hose was actually very, very soft from all the oil that had been in it. And then up next to the crankcase on the little port there, it's actually very tough, and I ended up having to get a very small rubber mallet, and make sure that can stay right there. Ended up getting a little rubber mallet and this thing right here, my little picker, and I ended up to pick the rest of the hose off. I mean, you can see the little chunks. Well, I thought you could. Maybe I picked them all up already. But I had to pick up all the chunks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get this all cleaned up, get all the dirt and debris off the back of this before I pull this hose off. And then I'm going to go ahead. I don't think, since the pump was working fine, normally what you could do is you could take the 4 screws off and pull the lid of this pump, but you run the risk of tearing the gasket in there. I think I'm just going to forego that for right now, just because I don't think it necessarily needs it, and rather than tear up a gasket, the rubber membrane that you can't get anymore, so you end up buying a used pump or whatnot, I think I'm just going to pass on that, and we'll just clean up the outside and everything and go from there. So clean this up, and then we can start replacing fuel lines.